All right,
We're back. Who is Rizal Javier?
Um, so Rizal Javier, I'm an artist and educator in San Diego, and I feel like the mission that I'm working on right now is just to be making art to help myself figure out who I am. And my goal as an instructor is to use the tools that I've learned from like my own experience to help the community share their stories.
very cool.
Thank you.
And
And who is Melvin Parker?
I am Mel Parker. I go by Mel most of the time. Co-owner of EQ Studios, creator, executive producer of the Block TV, the Spotlight, and I also work with NBC San Diego.
Nice. One of the things we were talking about before we started live here is not only what brought you to your work, but what brought you to San Diego and the connections between, you and the place. So maybe we can go back down the line. Not only so the who are you, but where are you? Where are you right now in your life, and maybe what's the connection between what you're doing now and the place where you're residing and working?
That's deep. I'll let you go first. I'm gonna jack you for answers.
I'm actually born and raised in San Diego, California. I'm from a suburb called Mira Mesa, which is also known as Manila Mesa. And where am I at right now? So I actually am really glad that I'm revisiting this idea of community, because I feel like I spent a lot of my early childhood trying to leave San Diego. I felt like constantly I never fit in. I feel like because my parents never really addressed, I'm first generation Filipino American, my parents didn't really address this type of my parents didn't help me address this side of my identity, and nobody in school helped me do that either, so I always kind of felt like out of place. And so like when I went to school, when I finally left for college, I went to the farthest place that I could go to, and it wasn't until I came back that I realized that the reason why I tried to get away was because I didn't have that sense of community. And so I think when I came back to San Diego, like back in 2007, so I've almost been here for 10 years now since I left for college, my mission kind of revealed itself to me. And I didn't know that I was planning on working with the community. I didn't know that I would like video. I was just a photo student, like in college. And when I started learning about the power of photography and how people could really use it to share a message, I got really interested in video because I feel like everybody loves watching videos. And so, yeah, I feel like my stage in life right now is about how do I make all my identities intersect? And so like my love for teaching, my love for the community, my own interest in arts as an artist, and like how does art impact my life? I feel like right now what I'm trying to do is bring all those identities together.
Cool.
Very good.
Mel, we're going to get to the where you are in your work, as in the Block TV stuff. We can get to that, but I want to start with you personally. So where are you from? How did you find your way to San Diego? Walk us through that story and get us up to the work.
So I'm a military brat. So I grew up in the Philippines, ironically. Came back to the States when I was about 15 years old. And so I grew up in this very diverse, environment my entire life, between Taiwan and the Philippines. And so that's what my world looked like up until that point. And then I moved back to the States. And Nebraska is not exactly diverse, so I was there for a year and didn't quite fit in. Moved to Alabama, and it got a little worse than Nebraska, and as far as diversity goes. And so I was always uncomfortable in those environments. Not so much uncomfortable, but just felt like I didn't fit in, like I didn't have an identity like yourself. And so being a military brat, it was natural for me to explore joining the military, even though I had a strong electronics background. You know, through high school, I was good at electronics, but so I was like, okay, how can I use this in the world today? Took a semester of college, wasn't working out, so I joined the Navy and ended up in San Diego. And so when I got here, one thing that I loved about it was it felt like home immediately when I got here. The diversity, the various communities that they have in San Diego, it just worked out for me. So I've never left. So I've been here since I was 18, and I've been here ever since. And so I spent most of my time I did the Navy thing for 4 years, and then I became a government contractor, which allowed me to travel to Japan and overseas and around the country and whatnot. And it really had a big influence on me being a government contractor as far as like work ethic and different things like that. So I gained that strong work ethic. My dad's the same way, and but I always felt like something was missing. Like, you know, and one day I remember saying, you know, hey, I'm doing extremely well at government contracting. I know I got a job. If I want to work for the rest of my life, I know I have an opportunity to do that in this field. But something was tugging on me to a point where it was like, you know, I don't want to die like this. That was this, you know, people always ask me, like, how do you go from government contracting to getting involved with media and entertainment? And it was just trying to find my purpose. So, you know, how I found my purpose, it's a long drawn out story that involves scholarships and marriage and a bunch of other things that kind of got me to this point that I won't bore the audience with. But I ended up in media, and somehow, and once I got into media, it's like, what do you want to do? And like Riz, it was like, I have a sense of community. I'm very relational. You know, I love people. I love making a difference. They say if you find something that you would do for free, you know, you usually found your passion. And so I enjoy being around people. I enjoy helping. I enjoy giving back. And I didn't know what that looked like. And so I just brainstorm, how can I give back? And that's how the concept of the Block TV came about.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah. I'll just say to the audience and to the folks here, you know, Sound Future and what this collaboration is about is exposing young people, young professionals, folks in the community who wouldn't otherwise access the network of folks that we bring to these panels and workshops and to this environment, to kind of give them a glimpse into possible futures. That's and especially in the creative careers. And that's, I know, what Virgil Ramos, who's not here today, unfortunately, the founder, the originator, the mastermind behind Sound Future, is what he brings to the table, and why so many great folks come here. And whatever the background, wherever you're coming from, it's unique in every case. But one of the things, a theme that at least I've seen in the work here at Arts, is that often the skills, the kind of things that makes it the best creative, that connects you to that passion, that purpose, often it isn't entirely found in school. And you mentioned this, Riz, and Mel, you mentioned this as well before we came on today. But you know, what is it that you found in yourself that school didn't offer you, and what are those places, what are those people, parts of community where you were able to tap into that thing you were looking for?
So I would say that my Filipino identity or ethnicity didn't really come up in school conversation until I was in college, which I think is kind of crazy, because I feel like growing up in San Diego in this very diverse community, I mean, we're right next to Tijuana, we have a military base here. I feel like we have this very unique type of diversity that's in San Diego. And for the topic of ethnicity to not show up in elementary school, middle school, high school, and a lot of my experience with learning that process is through personal experience. So I didn't have anybody guiding me, like, when someone told me that I was whitewashed, I didn't know how to respond to that. And that's not like a term that you could look up in the dictionary. And at the time, maybe I probably couldn't even find it on the internet. You know, I feel like in middle school, I was just on AOL. And so, yeah, like all this information compared to kids now who know, like, if they're identifying with like being they, them, or her, and she and her, his and him, like, I feel like that's just like a huge gap of like the kind of education I feel like that I missed growing up. And yeah, I feel like that's why I developed Bridge. Like for me, Bridge is about bridging the gap between education and community. And I feel like the project itself is constantly evolving, because as I get more involved with my community, I listen to them and I see like, okay, well, these are the gaps that I'm experiencing. What are the gaps that you're experiencing, and how can we use this project to fill those in?
Can I just say, so the sounds like those are some themes. I mean, the identity theme, personal themes that didn't come up maybe in the curriculum in those sort of official spaces. In terms of places, spaces off campus in the community, are there places that you remember that were either a refuge or a place of inspiration that you would seek out, online or off?
Not too many come to my mind. Like growing up, my parents were constantly at work, so they always wanted me to come home. And so I would say my biggest inspiration and place where I looked for community growing up was actually television. And I think that we know that that media representation is a big topic, I think, right now. Like, how do we see ourselves portrayed in the media? And when I was growing up, I watched shows like Full House and Step by Step. And I think that really like messed with my idea of like who I was, and also like when can I feel proud of myself, because everything that I saw on TV was everything that I wasn't. And so I think that really like messed with my self-esteem and my just like how I viewed myself, because I constantly thought like, oh, I'm not like them. Like every example that I saw, it just reminded me like, oh, I'm not like them. And since nobody was talking to me about these topics at school, I just kind of let that fester, I think, until way after college and becoming a teacher and realizing like, oh, I kind of have control in my classroom. Like I don't have to talk about the things that people want me to talk about, and I'm gonna use all my time to talk about the things that people never talk about.
I mean, you're kind of talking about TV as a second home, right? And if the stories that you're seeing are those that you relate to, or if there's big gaps and absences, right, to not be able to relate to those, then what is that feeling of homelessness in the second home, right, in terms of TV? And I mean, it's a bridge, I think, to Mel, your work now. And I know we've got, we'll have a few videos that we can show here, and I hope we can capture those. We can share the links at best through the stream. And I'm not sure if they're going to come through on the live stream itself, but both Mel and Riz will be talking about that. And I want to come back to Mel here to talk about Block TV and what you're doing there. And if you'll let me, I'll kind of tee it up for you. And you said that the goal of Block TV is to create interviews that allowed subjects to be storytellers, not just sellers, to share their hardships, accomplishments, and their future endeavors. So tell us what Block TV is, and then sort of walk us into the trailer we can show for an upcoming season.
Okay, so the Block TV, we basically do what I call mini documentaries of people in the areas of business, entertainment, arts, technology, and sports. The acronym for it is BEATS. And so we just basically tell the stories for the reason she was talking about. Like for me, I've seen Soul Train and all the, representation of African Americans, but not in a way that I could identify with, right? It was someone else's interpretation of what African Americans were, or Filipino Americans, or Mexican Americans were. And so I wanted people to be able to have a platform to tell their story their way, how they want it to, unfiltered, so that the next Riz that watches TV would see someone that, I guess where that feeling of homelessness that you spoke about, that void would be filled through content that we create, and that we would inspire people, it serves as multiple platforms, because we want to inspire people as well. And, I didn't want to make it a show that was just about, oh, it's just a minority show. I didn't want to be pigeonholed. So it is diverse. It represents how I grew up in the Philippines. It's all cultures. It's all different, people from different walks of life and at different levels in their lives. And we wanted to share those types of stories with our audience, with the world, really.
So this is the trailer. Before we push play, if you can, you're coming off season 1.
Correct.
Tell us a highlight of tell us what season 1 was about, what you were trying to achieve with that, and maybe a highlight, and then we'll hit play over here.
Okay. So season 1, when we put it out, it was exactly what I described. We just wanted to tell strong stories about people in the areas of the beats that I described earlier. And so in season 1, we were able to reach out to areas that people, a lot of people didn't even know about that existed. And you hear me say that in the trailer. And one of the things I didn't want to do is make it a big infomercial. So as I was producing the show, a lot of businesses, San Diego is a huge pay-for-play type. When it comes to media, it's always pay for play. So we wanted to create something that was genuine, that wasn't pay for play. We're not going to do your commercial. We love your product and we love what you do, but we love learning about you more than your product. Whatever you are doing that's amazing, that had to be a byproduct to your story. So we wanted to tell that in season 1. I think we did a great enough job to where we aired on CW, and here we are in season 2. And the audience will see a lot of familiar names of people in businesses and organizations that they know about but don't know the story behind. And we want to share those stories so we can inspire people to follow as corny as it sounds, to follow their dreams or whatever it is that they want to do in life.
Well, when you land on the page, the studio EQ studio page, it says where passion meets expression. So that feels like a nice tagline too for what's coming here. So here's the trailer for season 2 upcoming.
People have knocked me down so many times and told me that I will never be able to achieve things, and to be able to look back and I did it. I didn't listen to them, but it pushed me to keep going.
Always having an open mind, never saying no, throwing things against the wall that work and some don't work. But you never know where something's going to go. But if you're not open, if you're closed-minded, nothing good happens.
Can't just sit back and be lazy and expect things to happen. You need to put your body in gear, put it on drive and move on.
The reason why I came up with the concept of the block is because of just a lot of pride that I take in San Diego. I've been here since I was a teenager. There's so much in San Diego to offer that even I didn't know about myself, and so it was an opportunity to kind of showcase those things, not only just have a show, but to make a difference, to have an impact, be able to expose businesses that I loved, but people just didn't know about, that didn't have a platform to be seen. And that's why I created the blog.
It's Nick Cannon. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an activist. I'm a leader. You're watching The Block.
Cool. Thank you.
Fun. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So I want to come back to Riz with this idea of place and your work, because you've been busy.
Busy, but in a good way.
Yeah, I bet that it's both energizing and tiring at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'm 35 now, so I got a lot of years to catch up on, a lot of education that I missed, and so it's a huge wave that's coming at me, but I'm like, I don't know, I'm still able to stand through it. It's nice.
So you're coming off two big projects that you were producing, curating, putting on simultaneous. That I'd like you to kind of walk us through those. And we've got some materials about, I think, at least one, maybe both, at the table by the door there. I'm just going to let you introduce them both.
Yeah. So there's two, and I feel like my process is that I do something on my own, and then when I learn it, I like to take it out to the community. And so right now, what I have is a solo exhibition at the New Americans Museum, and it's called Landsick. And basically, or I guess I'll start with the term, is I found out about I first heard the term used, like I was like traveling internationally, and I was actually in a boat, and I noticed something that I hadn't really realized was a pattern before. But I was on this boat, and I was very like happy, and I was kind of crying and tearing up, and I feel like because I was standing there by myself, people were looking at me like, "Oh, is she okay? Is there something wrong?" And someone came up to me and started talking to me, and I just described like, "Hey, I have this very weird sensation, like that I've been here before, and that I feel so comfortable, and I feel like I'm at home." And the guy that was talking to me said, "Oh, maybe you're landsick." And I was like, "What does that mean?" He said, "A long time ago, or like when sailors would go out to sea, they would get like very used to the motion and rocking of the water, that when they would actually live back on land, they would feel like physically ill." And so then I started thinking about when I was younger and how I was always constantly trying to leave San Diego. And so, yeah, I just started thinking about like, what are the things that make me not feel like I'm constantly at home, especially because I'm born and raised San Diego is like super confusing. So the show Landsick is really about me exploring intergenerational relationships. So I kind of go back like 4 generations of my family, which is not very far, but how far I've gone so far. And I feel like, being first generation American, that's like a common thing that happens in San Diego because it's filled with lots of migrant families. I thought that this would be like a great place to kind of share that story and make people feel like they're not alone. And so all these experiences that I had researching my family, I feel like I brought into the classroom when I was working on the Little Saigon project. And so that's my community project that was actually hosted through the Media Arts Center San Diego and also the Aja project. So that project was made to bring light to the Vietnamese community in the City Heights area. And as an artist instructor at the Aja project, whose mission is to use photography as a means to get people to share their story, that I ended up working with a group of Vietnamese American students, most of them from UCSD, who were students studying under Professor Yen, who is an ethnic studies professor at the school. And so my goal for the project and for the grant was to try and archive these stories so that they can be shared over time, right? And I feel like this is totally in alignment with what I'm doing because this idea of representation is also like documentation. I think that's why recently I've been really into documentary, because I thought, okay, it's really great to have this like awareness and this learning, but if it's not recorded, then it's almost like it's not there. And I feel like we're growing up in this space where like people are using Instagram, and if it's not on your story, maybe it's not really happening. And I don't like to think that that's true, but you know, it's a reality that we're facing. So I feel like documentation is a really big thing. And so what I got the chance to do was work with students, teach them how to use their cameras, help them actually interview people in the community. And then just recently what we did was we acquired a building right in Little Saigon District, and we were able to showcase their work, let people read the stories, and make a show that's like for the community, in the community, and accessible for them. And I feel like those are all things basically, I'm just trying to do all the things that I wish I had growing up.
So I want to stay with Landsick for a bit because I know there's a short video that's fun on the Landsick page. Can you tell us about, kind of give us the background to it, some of the pieces, how your approach to curating the exhibition, making choices, and what went into the exhibition itself that folks can see when they go to the New Americans Museum?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I'm a trained photographer, so all of the photos in the exhibition are actually not photos that I took myself. And for the last 2 years, I'd say that I haven't really had the urge to shoot with my camera. And so that made me start to think about, how do images impact me? So if I'm losing this drive to shoot, like what kind of images excite me? And when I went to the Philippines for the first time when I was 30, so that was like 5 years ago, I encountered all these photo albums that my grandma had just been collecting from all of the years. And since she was in the Philippines, everybody in the US sends her photographs so that she knows like what's going on in our life. And I was turning through these books and I had this very weird sensation like, oh my gosh, there's people in this book that look like me. And I felt like that opened up the gates of all those feelings of like not seeing myself like in the library or like on TV. And so I kind of just stuck with that feeling like, oh my gosh, my family photos are making me excited. There's probably something there that I don't know what that is. And so all of the images in the exhibition are of my family, but I felt like I couldn't just put the actual photos like on display. I felt like they had to show and like they had to also reflect me, and like I had to recontextualize them in some way so that people knew like when they were looking at pictures of my family, it wasn't about what they looked like, but it was like how I felt about them. And so I came across, or I started thinking about like, okay, what form does this take? And I started thinking about the boat and like, what does the boat mean to me? And growing up, the term fresh off the boat was something that came up in discussion a lot. And I feel like it was often used like in a derogatory way. So like people would say like, oh, you're a fob. And I felt like that reinforced like, oh, I'm different. Like even though I'm born and raised San Diego, I speak English and I go probably to the same school as like these people that were making fun of me. Like people would use that term to talk about me or to make fun of my parents. And so I kind of wanted to break down that shape, I guess. And so what you'll see in the video and what I love about the process is that all the photos of my family are in these boats, and as I fold the boat from like just a flat piece of paper to like the object that it becomes, my family members start to intersect like as I fold, and it really makes me start to think about our relationship and how it changes and how people move away from each other and then come back to each other. And so, yeah, that's how I arrived to the shape of the boat, and the show was born.
So here we go. We have a short video we've got queued up. Check it out.
I think that the photos show, despite our generational differences, that me and my family have something in common, that we all share this feeling that's really hard to explain. It's about wanting to be in two places at the same time, the things that we gave up, the need to give your family the best life that they can have, living up to the expectation of our parents, fulfilling the legacy of our grandparents, our ancestors. There's a lot of feelings that we have to deal with that we don't really understand. It's so nice to see it not on my laptop.
Right.
So you brought it up in the video, so I'm going to go there, which is you're in your practice as an artist. There's a deep social practice to it. It's reflective of not just you, but the family and multi-generations. You talk about the hybridity of culture and the complexity of these intergenerational relationships, of binational families. What is the conversation with your family now about the art and your practice of it?
So that's something that I feel like is happening right now. I haven't actually taken my family to the show, and I feel like that is a really good example of like why I needed to do this show, I guess. So I am planning to take them. I'm working up the courage to bring them to a space that's really unfamiliar, and I don't know how they're going to respond to it. You know, like I feel like they might walk in and they might get mad at me and say like, why are you showing these very like personal photos of our family in this museum space? Or they might be really happy. So I feel like the reason why I'm uncomfortable with it is I have asked my family to go to shows in the past, and I think because of our generational gap, it's hard to distinguish like what's important, I guess. And so in a recent documentary, like someone's working on a documentary that I'm in called Mujer Mariposa, and the director and the cinematographer went with me to interview my grandma. And that was a really special thing because my grandma lives in the Philippines. And so they asked her, and these are two women in the community that are like, oh, you do so much. We're so proud of you. Like, we're so glad that you're active. So they asked my grandma, do you think she's successful? And she was like, oh, no. No, she's not doing good at all. She doesn't have her own house. She doesn't have a full-time job. She doesn't have a family. She's a really noble person, and she said, I'm really proud of my granddaughter for who she is, but would I call her successful? I don't know. I don't think so. Like, she doesn't have the things that I feel like make me feel comfortable to be like an independent person, you know? And so I feel like that's something that I struggle with still. And when actually the ED of the New Americans Museum asked me, like, hey, are you gonna bring your family here? Like, I think this is a really important show. And she mentioned to me, I see a lot of your father there. I see that there's a relationship with you and your father that's very intense, has this energy when I come into the room. And I thought, wow, I can't believe it didn't cross my mind. And so I think for me, because my art is about process, I don't really know usually what I'm doing when I'm making stuff, but now I know why. It's because I need it to make sense. And so I feel like the processing always comes after the production.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's good.
Mel, your parents are from Alabama?
Yeah, both are from Mobile, Alabama.
And you told us before that it was kind of a long circle back for you finding your way at some point in your teenage years after living abroad, growing up abroad in a military family, and then being back in the States in Nebraska and Alabama. Mm-hmm. What has been the conversation in your family over your lifetime, the iterations you've gone through both in your career and now finding yourself in media across the generations?
Well, I think we had almost similar experiences as, you know, what is success? Myself personally, there was a long period of time. There were stretches of like 5 years where I wouldn't go back to Alabama because I'm like, they don't get me. They don't get my lifestyle, what I'm doing. Why go back? Why explain? Let me just do life. And so, like you, I just did life, right? And then as I got older, and started reconnecting, and I don't know where I'm even trying to go with this, but I felt like me being out here was very different. You know, growing up a military brat, I think me staying out here, I wanted part of my childhood experience because those were the happiest times for me. And I think, you know, going to Alabama, it just wasn't like good memories for me. And I felt like what I wanted to do with my life, people would not get it. You know, I remember when I told them, hey, I'm leaving government contracting and I'm going to start over as some intern in media to try to build a career for myself. And it's the same thing. They don't look at that as being successful. Why would you leave a successful career? Why would you step out like that and do something crazy? Don't you want to retire and, you know, go off into the sunset? Life is very secure for you now. And so, you know, because of that, it kept me distance, you know, like her with not showing the exhibit to her family. My family didn't even see the show until after it had been on TV. And then even then I was kind of like hesitant about showing it. But once they did see it, to my surprise, they were floored. So, you know, that was I'm not saying that'll be your experience, but it was great to see them react that way and see that, no, this guy's serious about what he's doing, and that he does it well, you know. That was important to me too, you know, if I do it well, work hard at it, that type of thing. So, yeah. Hope that answered your question. I don't think I answered it in totality, but I think I touched on a few things as far as what you were trying to get out of me. And if not, you can ask again. I'll try to answer it better.
I'd follow up. It's also your question, so it's how you want to take it. Let's jump to EQ Studios,
Okay.
where you are now, and I know that it's a very personal story, an interesting one about the industry itself and your pathway in it. Tell us about meeting Hector Ramos, the founder, and how you came to EQ.
So I went to National University, and around my junior year, I started interning at NBC, which was a godsend because, I mean, National University was the best thing to happen to me in a sense of they taught me journalism very well, but I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and some of the tools that I felt I needed, I didn't feel like I got them out of school. And it's not just National University. I think many times students go to school and they graduate and it's like, okay, you know, unless you get a good internship, you don't even know what tools you need. So it was great for me to intern at NBC, and then they ended up hiring me part-time to work there. And, you know, at that time I told my wife, hey, you know, I know I'm not going back to government contracting once I got to NBC. And I said, give me 5 years and I'm going to learn the industry, and then I'll start working on projects that she and I had discussed, different things that we had in common that we wanted to create. So in that 5th year of being at NBC, I started working on the concept for the block. And so I start working on it, fail. And one of the guys that was on one of the teams I had built circled back around and was saying, hey, I want you to meet this guy, Hector Ramos. He has EQ Studios. I was like, great. You know, I felt disappointed, you know, because I had so many failures. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a try, but I'm not getting my hopes up. So I meet Hector. He's like, hey, I like what you're doing. He says, I want to show you something. And all I told him was a concept of what I wanted to create. So he's like, let me show you this video. We go to the back, and he had this piece called Back to Basics, and it was just the arts only. So the block covers business, entertainment, art, technology, and sports. So this was only arts, but it was the way that he filmed it was almost identical to what I had just described to him. So he's like, hey, you know, let's give it a try. So I was like, all right, bet. Didn't call him back for a month, didn't go back and see him, because I was like, I'm not, that feeling of failure, I was like, I can fail on my own and feel better, right? That was my thinking. So I didn't even call him for about a month. And I remember I went to church on a Sunday, and the sermon was like really motivating. And I told my wife, I'm going to get back out there. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to start filming again and what have you. By about 7:30 the next morning, Hector calls me and says, hey, dude, what's up? You know, I thought we were going to work on this project. I was like, oh, okay, let me come down. So I come down, I explained to him why I didn't call him and all this stuff. And he's like, hey, let's get going. So we started working together on putting the block and building what would become the block. And we had worked on it for about a year. And it took me that first full year of us kind of figuring out what the block is. It took me that whole year to kind of trust him. Like, I really wasn't giving it my all because I had this expectation that he'll pull the plug at any point. He had all the you know, he had the studio, he had the camera, all the stuff that we were using. So I didn't get my hopes up high. So a year goes by, and then finally I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna have to trust him. Yet, and you know, if it fails, at least this year I learned so much. So once I did that and really opened up, the show started to develop. Things started to happen, and so we started producing the show, and we started putting it out online and started gaining traction. You know, we were doing these interviews. People were starting to hear about us a little bit, and so we started gaining traction. And we finished a whole full season of the show. And I was like, man, you know, let's go into season 2. We start prepping for season 2. The entire team, you know, and I'm gonna shorten the story because there's a lot of details in it, ends up leaving. It's just hard. What we do, being in this industry, trying to sustain and maintain something that high of a level is just a lot of work. It takes a lot out of people. And when I work with people, yeah, I do demand a lot. Yep, I do want it right. If we got to do it over, we're going to do it over. So it's stressful when you're in the concept stage of this. So we do season 1 and finish it all online. CW calls us and says, hey, bring the whole full season down. We want to air it. So then it becomes a TV show. We start working on season 2. Team leaves, and it's just me and Hector. And we go, that's the end of like 2017. In the beginning of 2018, we spent most of that time just me and him being a part of the studio. And at that time, I was the block, and then there was a studio. So I had to figure out, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to, you know, I've built a reputation, I've got a following. I could literally, at this point, leave on my own and kind of do my own thing if he pulls a plug and decides that he can't keep the studio open anymore because it's just me and him at that point. So we go through it, and I'm like, screw that. We've worked hard. We're going to figure it out. Whatever that takes, we're going to figure it out. And so we start working towards it. And at that time, I was like, man, probably like a year and a half prior, I told him, hey, I'm going to be your business partner one day. So we're going through 2018, and around November of 2018, his business partner at that time calls me and says, hey, I want to sell you my stake in the studio. I was like, wait, what? You know, it just kind of caught me off guard. It was just out of the blue. It was very random. And he says, I want to sell you my stake in the studio. I was like, okay, you know, my pockets aren't deep like that. NBC isn't paying me millionaire money. So I was like, you know, and to his credit, he says, hey, I've watched you for the past year. I want you to own it. So let's figure out what that looks like to help you become co-owner to work with Hector. And so we figured it out. I secured the funding. And in November of last year, I became Hector's business partner. And at the beginning of 2019, we just, you know, we bonded very strong. It made us tougher in 2018. And when 2019 came in, we decided we're going to revamp everything. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to make this studio what we want it to be. And from that point on, we never look back, and a lot of amazing things have happened. Our partnership with San Diego State, the Film Connection, working with the GI Film Festival, working with Natus, which is the Emmy Awards, working with them, and a whole slew of other things that we've been able to do since January of 2019.
So you both talked a lot about the risk-taking you've done in your personal and professional lives, right, and changes, right, and what that activation energy is, right, to go from that thing you've been doing for a while to whatever that next project is or the next phase of career. And there's a ton of learning in that, right? And so
absolutely
that role
yep.
of, I mean, self-learning about oneself, but also learning from others. So I want to transition to talking about learners and teachers and come back to Riz. And you mentioned before the Bridge and that work you're doing, and also the work you're doing with the Media Arts Center, Real Voices, and Pacific Arts Movement, and on and on and on. Do you want to walk us through some of your the things you're doing, the commitments you've got with different organizations and projects in the education realm?
Yeah, sure. So with Bridge, basically, I use it as like my umbrella project for anything that I do with the community. And so what I try to do as an instructor of like 10 years now in San Diego area is like right now I work at Cal State San Marcos and I also work at Southwestern College. We're at like completely opposite areas of San Diego County. And so what I try to do with Bridge is get them to know each other, right? And like to get people from the North County to see what's going on in the southern part of California and vice versa. I've done it, let's see, like the thing that's really nice, I guess I'll talk about the beginning, is when I first started doing Bridge, it just was these photo workshops where I take these people out to the desert and teach them a photo technique. And it went from like 3 people to like 10 people and then 20 people. I think I got up to like 30 people once in a camping trip. And what I started to see was that people were coming to do photo stuff, but then there were just some people coming to chill. And then that made me think like, oh my gosh, it's just happening. Like the community that I was looking for just started showing up. And it was funny because Bridge was really born from that interaction. Like I didn't plan on making it, but people just started seeing me and they're like, I think you're the point person. Like, are you in charge of this? Like, what nonprofit are you? And I was like, I'm not a nonprofit. I'm just like a independent person wanting to do stuff. And so what I started to do, because I didn't know that world, I was in the college world basically for like 5 years. I couldn't leave those jobs because I needed financial security, but what I did was I went half-time. So instead of teaching 3 to 4 classes at colleges, I started teaching 2 and then working at a couple of nonprofits. And so the first one that I got involved with was Pack Arts Movement, and I've had many hats with that organization, but I think where I landed was Real Voices. And so with Real Voices, it's a documentary film program for youth. And we serve students all the way, even from Tijuana, all the way up to, I think the farthest north we've had was Temecula. And so I work with students to produce their own film, and then we screen them every year at the San Diego Asian Film Festival. I also work with the Aja Project. That's how I got connected to Media Arts Center. And through the Aja Project, I've had a very eye-opening experience working with students to teach them participatory photography, having students from Barrio Logan, students in juvenile detention centers. Like really, I felt like in those classrooms, I was talking to the people that I feel like I related to. And so they were always people that felt like they didn't know where their home is, that they didn't feel part of the in crowd. And I feel like photo was a way for us to bring that all together. Yeah, and so I really feel super thankful that I worked for those organizations and that they kind of built that foundation and awareness for me to figure out what it is that I want to do with the community. I'm still figuring it out.
There's a term we use, and so this resonates a lot because I'm in that world as well, running a creative youth development nonprofit. Can you tell us briefly? So we hear this term "teaching artist" that's out there. Fill in that definition. Fill in that person for us. What is a teaching artist in all its dimensions?
Yeah, I think that this is it's a new term for me as well, but I think something that gets masked as a college instructor is that I often get cornered by the class that I'm teaching. And so I'm at Cal State San Marcos, I teach a video class, so they're like, Riz, she's a video instructor. And I feel like in those circumstances, like I taught photo for 10 years, and in those circumstances, I feel like I go way far beyond like teaching shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, which is the standard that people ask for in school, because they want to make people, or school I feel like is really associated with jobs instead of really learning about who you are. And so for me, what I learned after 5 years of teaching is that the principles of photography is not enough for me. I feel like I need to know why people need to produce things. And I think that that's where teaching artists are essential in every community. Like the community needs to know who those teaching artists are because they're producing work that is a reflection of what's happening around us. Yeah, and so I feel like teaching artists are not just teachers, They are historians, they're archivalists, they are therapists, they are social workers, they are this culmination of all these different jobs that come hidden with the profession of being an instructor.
There's so many projects you've done that in your own portfolio, and you know we talked at the top about Lansing and Little Saigon stories that are happening now. Can you talk about the intersection of your life as an educator and your life as an artist? Where do those come together in the sense of co-creation? That is, are you creating with your students? Are you building that into the curriculum you teach and into your overall approach?
Yeah, I feel like that's where I'm at right now. Like I'm trying to figure that out. And so, like I mentioned before, I feel like first I do something on my own, and then I try to figure out like what's the significance of that to my community. So a project that's in the works and it's very new, it's called the Balikbayan Project. And in English that means returning Filipino. And I really love the name of the title because it works on lots of different levels. I feel like I'm not native to Philippines and left and come back, but I'm also just like trying to return to my Filipino roots. And so in this project, what I'm trying to do is explore the Balikbayan box as a symbol of the Filipino diaspora. And so basically a Balikbayan box is a big carton box that people purchase. It's a service so that you fill it with lots of goods and then it gets transported to the Philippines for a relatively low cost. And I feel like it's a really unique thing because Balikbayan services, there are 2 locations in San Diego alone. And through my interviews, I've seen that people are, like 1,000, they're servicing like over 1,000 people in a week. And I feel like that's a lot of boxes of stuff that are getting transported from San Diego to the Philippines. And so I started interviewing people and asking them about their experiences of like, what do they send and how often do you send it? And like, why? Why are you sending all these goods? And oftentimes they're very like normal household goods like shampoo and soap, slippers and things like that. And I just think like, this is a very interesting practice for a community. And I don't think that people realize that it's very special and that it really is revealing something about our culture and who we are. The fact that the word Balikbayan exists, and Tagalog is a very old language. And so for me to have a term in a native language that describes this action of leaving the country and coming back, that just shows that it's a big thing. And so what I found through all the interviews is that the objects are very symbolic. It's almost that it's not really about the objects that they send, but it's about filling the gap of the relationship that they can't have by having this like separation of land and water. And that when people are sending toothpaste, it's not because they're thinking about how they need to brush their teeth. It's just that they love the people that they're giving it to, and they want to make sure that they're taken care of and that they have these luxuries, I think, that make people think, or I feel like people are dealing with like, how does it feel to leave someplace? Is there a guilt? Is there a happiness? Is there a sadness? And I feel like all of those emotions are being held by the objects that they're like sending to the Philippines.
I'm just thinking of this question right now on the spot because I'm thinking about Mel and your past in the Philippines.
Yeah.
As you're listening to this, what's resonant? What's going on? What are you hearing?
Every bit of it resonates with me because, and that's where I got my sense of community, right? Like I grew up in the Philippines, so we did that. Like to this day, my sister-in-law is Filipino. To this day, they still do that. They have an organization called Helping Hands. So with Helping Hands, that's what they do. They send back boxes. Like everything she was saying, it brought back a flood of memories. But for me, that's community. That's what I looked at community as being. And so even with me doing the block, part of that it's my way of giving back. You know, I always tell people, like, why don't you celebrate the people that are here? Like, why don't you give back to them? People have accomplished something. You know, everyone should give back. Like, for me, I feel like I've been fortunate to do what I do and be able to accomplish some of the things I've accomplished. Not that I've accomplished much, but even with the little that I've been able to accomplish, finding a way to be able to give back and to have a sense of community, and that people have a sense of identity through that giving in some way, if you will. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, because it's important. You know, it's important that people do that. And then for me, being in the Philippines, I could see when people would receive those boxes and how it made them feel and how they stayed connected, the importance of family and community and unity and what have you. So yeah.
I was just gonna say too that I brought the project with me in a very prototype form to the PhilAmFest last year, and it was so refreshing to see so many people like want to share. Mm-hmm. And so that for me was a realization that the community's there, they just don't know what to do. They're looking for guidance. And so I would say through all the hardship and like fighting with my dad and all these things, it's like, well, that's what it was for. Like, it's just all come full circle. It makes sense to me now that everything that I went through is to help other people see like they're not alone. And then also for subsequent generations that, yeah, it's not something you have to feel bad about.
Right.
We've been going for a little while, and I just checked the feed online. No questions there yet, but I want to encourage folks who are watching on the live stream, if they have questions, to join us by jumping and asking questions. This is Sound Future, panel portion right now. Today's theme is audio video, but obviously we've gone so much deeper than that with our guests here, Mel Parker and Rizal Javier. I'm looking at the audience now, and I'm looking at both of you. So if right now we can kind of open it up for a conversation. If there are questions from the audience or questions of yourselves for each other that are coming to mind, I've got plenty. I can do this all day.
Yeah.
But let me sort of open the door. Anything from you?
Any questions?
Don't be shy.
As somebody that's graduating from state, how can you make the jump from being, obviously working on different projects as an intern, independent projects, to make a full? Oh. Hello. Okay. So as somebody graduating from a university, how can you transition from independent projects and side projects and internships to almost pursuing a career as an artist?
I think the important thing is to understand like where you are, right? Like I always tell people are like, man, you got to show on TV, all this stuff. You're working. Like I've been able to transition from an intern at NBC to owning my own studio, having a TV show and those things. But it didn't happen overnight. It was one of those things that I understood the demographic that I was in. San Diego's not a media town. It's not a television town. You're not going to find a bunch of TV productions around town filming like you would in LA or if you went to Atlanta. So what do you do in an environment like that? And I took a picture of a piece of art in there, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, you got to create the world that you want to live in. For me, that's what drives me every day, is like, no, I understand that San Diego's not a media town, so that means I have to move somewhere to accomplish my dreams. And me personally, I'm stubborn. So it's like, no, if I don't see it, I'm going to build it. I'm going to find a way. But and this is the important part, most people don't want to go through that. No one wants to go through this hard, arduous process of building something. They want to walk into something that's ready-made. I drop some water on it, it grows, and I'm off and running. But we don't live in, being in San Diego, if you're trying to do something on the immediate, you're either going to work for the news or be filming in someone's hotel, different conferences. But if you're talking about being a creative with television shows and short films and documentaries, either it takes work. I don't know how long you've been working on the documentaries or how long you've been in the industry, but even, I mean, just sharing with, I know how long it's taken me to get to where I'm at, and I think I've gotten a few lucky breaks. And I was sharing with James that, you know, if there's a gift that I have, you know, those that work with me, I'm not the technical guy. I'm not going to tell you how many lumens or the ISO or f-stop and all that. I can get down. I can hold my own, but I don't consider myself an expert in those areas. But the two things that I do have is work ethic and passion. And I feel like if you have those two things, nothing gets in your way. She's passionate about what she does to a point where she traveled to the Philippines to get what she wants. You know, that's hard. She got to earn money, working part-time and trying to figure stuff out. But when you're passionate about what you do, you don't think of it in a way that other people think of it, you know. And with you being in San Diego, you have to be unconventional in your approach. You have to be willing to, because there is no blueprint out there. Like, who are you going to talk to if there are no production companies out there, right? So you have to create that platform. And for me, I feel like that's what we're doing with EQ Studios. And yeah, it's a slow process, but once that train gets rolling, you know, we write our own check basically. We create our own future of what we want to do. So surrounding yourself with the right people, finding out, you know, who's doing what in the community, and not waiting, you know. And for you, you're getting ready to graduate, but I would encourage anyone who may be watching online, you should be doing that your sophomore year. Your freshman year, you're just young, wild, and free, figuring yourself out. By your sophomore year, you should find out who's who's doing what, and don't settle. Like, go into an area you want to work in. You know, if it's not, like for me, I'm not a news guy. I got into it because I wanted to learn the television industry, and I wanted to learn the business side of it, not so much camera operation and that sort of thing. So that's why I did that. But you know, you've worked around me, and I want to do TV. I want to do TV shows, but there's no blueprint for it. So we're creating the blueprint, and you got to be willing to either do that or go somewhere where you can just get an instant job.
That's a really good question. I think that, again, another topic that is not really covered in school. So I think that I brought that with me, like, all the way through, like, grad school. So people, like, when you go to grad school, they don't tell you, like, you're going to have this probably massive depression when you get out because you don't know what you just did. And yeah, I just feel like I want to say that out loud for, like, the thousands of students that graduate.
It's true.
Like,
I second that. I co-sign.
Like, what am I doing with my life? And I think my advice, or it's coming out in advice, is that to just try everything. I feel like when you leave school, it's not that different from, like, dating, basically. Like, if you don't know what you want to do and what you want to commit to, your job is kind of to just say, like, yes to, like, every kind of production opportunity that you can get. And don't forget, because it's a very fast-paced world, to reflect. Like, I feel like when you have every job, think, like, do I realistically see myself there? And I think that's a question that I asked. And just like Melvin, I left a pretty safe position because somebody asked me, like, do you see yourself here till about 65? And I quickly answered, like, no. And so that was a good indicator for me that I'm not in the place that I need to be, even though I can, like, teach shutter speed, ISO, aperture. You know, I feel like that was a sign, like, okay, I need to go to the next place, and then to the next place, and then to the next place. Lucky for me, I did realize that I am very interested in teaching. And so I think that was another nudge that led me into just saying yes to everything. So I've literally been on film sets, but I've also, like, photographed faucets for, like, 2 years. And so having these, like, different spectrums of jobs is a really cool experience, because I could tell you for sure now, like, I definitely don't want to shoot faucets for the rest of my life. I did like video, working on a film production, but I also thought, like, I sat around a lot, and I didn't know if I was, like, maybe paying attention to the things that I was really interested in. I had to, like, focus on what the director wanted to focus on. And then I would also say my other advice is to have your own passion project. So as you're simultaneously like working for other people, you don't experience burnout, which I think is another topic that they don't talk about in school.
Right.
Is that you kind of give your heart and blood, sweat, and tears to all these directors because you're so thirsty for a job and an opportunity to succeed that you forget, like, why did I do this in the first place? And so I feel like having these projects on the side, so like I did Lansing, I did Little Saigon, but at the same time I was working on these other projects that I wasn't even sharing with people yet because I don't want to lose that drive. I don't want to lose that like feeling of love that I have that made me kind of go through school, like get through school and like tell everybody that told me that I shouldn't do that, like to F off, basically,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
or I was just like, yeah, I feel like you have to have that kind of boldness
Right.
or you're gonna cave really early, and then you're gonna like deal with all these questions that are like, you know, was it worth it? Was it worth it? And then I would say like the third piece of advice is like constantly ask yourself, could I live with myself if I don't try it? You know, is this like opportunity that's coming to me? Can I live with myself if I don't try it? Like, will it come back to me 20 years from now? And I'm like, that one day I had that
Right.
chance. Like, should I have done it? Like, I don't feel like I could ever live with those kinds of feelings. So I feel like that self-reflection is a nice way for me to keep me in check. You know, and yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like just now officially committing to this type of lifestyle. And I'm 35. It took a long time to be like, I'm going to do this.
Right. That last one is key of what she is saying. It's so key. It's so key. And because I experienced it, you know, going through this, you better be sure, you know, I didn't want to have any regrets. And that's why the question for myself came up. Could I see myself working as a government contractor as successful as I was at it for the rest of my life? And it was like, no. And you know, want to kind of add to what she was saying. One of the things I always tell myself is like, you know, what got me over the hump and really like fast tracked me to where I am today was I got over the fear of failure and making mistakes. Like, I don't live life in fear anymore. I'm not afraid of what others' opinions are of me or any project I'm working on or anything I'm doing in life. And that when you get out there, be bold with it. Don't, you know, if you have an idea and no one gets it, that's their problem. That's not yours, right? So you have to pursue those things because you may be creating your own avenue like she's been doing. She creates her own avenue through her work and boldness, even though she knew like, wait, my family may not get this. She had it, she kept doing it anyway. She kept doing it anyway, and now it's the thing that has made her successful, that has put her on this panel. So with you, I'm just like, you know, go for it. Don't be afraid to try new things, and don't be afraid of criticism or failure. And if you can hold on to those, I mean, you'll do great, trust me. You know, block out the voices.
There's a video y'all can find online, again, about Riz and your work. It's when you finished your residency at the New Children's Museum in downtown San Diego, and you have this phrase, and I'm going to butcher it here, but it's basically about stepping into your own bravery. And this theme of boldness and bravery is super important, right? Because I think what you've also heard today is about the various levels of discomfort, right? Whether it's surface level or deeper, right? That is about the exploration of really owning your identity as an artist and working, whether it's, you know, in relationship to family or oneself, and also transitions in careers, right? That the other side of that discomfort, right? Or the way to tackle it is through that boldness. We're going to wind down here. We've been going out a little while. I want to sort of end it with a question for both of you. It's the same question, which is sort of what are you sitting on now and reflecting on as we wind down this panel, and then maybe more concretely, what's next for you in your work, Mel at EQ, Riz in your work, exhibition-wise, teaching-wise, what's upcoming?
I feel like I'm really excited because this feeling of commitment is kind of, I'm through my choices, I'm seeing how committed I am now. And something that's really nice is I'm actually taking a break from teaching in the fall. It's the first break that I've taken from teaching. I started teaching actually my first year of grad school. And so I have not been in a space where I haven't just been focusing on helping others. And so I feel like I need to work on myself to be stronger in that skill of helping others. And so I'm going to go to the Philippines for 2 months and work on my own film, which is really exciting. I feel like with Bridge, I'm about to have a retreat with a core staff that I'm developing in June. And so it's nice to think about me not doing it by myself. As far as shows go, I have a show coming up at the front, opening in July on the 13th, and that's a really special location for me. So not just having shows, but picking strategically, like, where does my work need to be? And if you haven't been to the front, it's a gallery right on the San Ysidro border. And I think because I'm exploring this identity of being like binational, transborder, international, that that my work needs to be along the border so that I could be talking to people that are living that same but different experience. Yeah.
For me, we're putting out season 2 of The Block, fingers crossed, by the end of June. So if they're watching, no one else knows that, but at the end of June, I plan on, my team's looking like, really? But by the end of June, we'll have season 2 out. And then from there, we're working on projects with the community in Barrio Logan. We're in the pilot, in the incubator stage, if you will, of a program with the San Diego Police Department. And also another project that was kind of thrown our way, dealing with border issues and a lot of the things happening in the Hispanic community around San Diego. So those are 3 things that we have going on. And then, of course, season 2 of The Spotlight. So, yeah, that's it.
You're living full lives, both of you. Yeah, it's been great to spend time with you here. So thank you both.
Yeah,
No
thanks
worry.
for the opportunity.
Yeah, the pleasure was all ours. Thank you for the invite.
Well, I'm going to answer my own question, too, about what's upcoming here at A Reason to Survive. We've got a community open house happening Saturday, June 1st, 11 a.m. We'll go about 2 hours. We've got after-school classes whose students are going to be performing their musical works. Our partnership with Art of Elan, you're going to see the Young Artists in Harmony program, the final concert. So that's young people doing original compositions, digital composition. Those works are going to be performed by professional musicians who play in the San Diego Symphony. We've got our students in our visual and media arts classes that are going to be curating their own exhibition here in our gallery. A lot of fun stuff, and then a ton of community arts projects that'll be here in National City and around South Bay coming up over the coming weeks and months. So look out for that. Do you all want to shout out, do you have any kind of social media or anything like that you want folks to know about?
TheBlockSD.tv is our website. At TheBlockSD on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So those are, if you want to reach out to The Block.
Cool, and if you want to learn more about me and my work, you could find me on my website. My name is Rizzel Javier, spelled Rizzhel, Javier, Javier. You could also find out about some of my community events through Bridge, and the website is building-bridges.org. And before we go, just to spotlight, the Real Voices program is celebrating their 15th anniversary this year, so we do have a screening that I curated that's playing on May 31st. And yeah, it would be great to have everyone come out.
Nice. I got one more, sorry.
Let me just quickly, at Qualcomm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so at the Irving Jacobs Hall at Qualcomm on the 31st of May.
And then EQ Studios, of course. I'm not sure, I forgot my own company, but it's EQ-studios.com. So we're open, photographers, videographers, look us up, come check us out.
Furchel Ramos can't be here today. He's the again the mastermind behind Sound Future. So big shout out to Furch. We'll see you next time here. Thanks to Xavier Vasquez, found on YouTube at, let's see if I get this right, capital Z E U Q S A capital V. That's the channel we're on here for the live stream. Axient, Radio Axiom. That's Xavier too. Look him up. He's doing great work. We thank you a lot. And we're out.
Thank you.